The morning air at Buckingham Palace was painted in hues of soft gold and rose. A gentle mist clung to the ancient stones, lending the palace grounds a mystical atmosphere. As the sun rose higher, its rays caught the gleam of wrought iron gates and polished railings, casting ribbons of light across the historic facade. In the center of it all, unmoving and resolute, stood Michael Bennet, a royal guard in his immaculate scarlet tunic, brass buttons gleaming like stars. At only 27, he carried himself with a composure and discipline honed through 3 tours of military duty. His tall, commanding presence, emphasized by the traditional bearskin hat, made him both a symbol and a sentinel, an embodiment of duty and honor. Michael's posture was impeccable, his boots polished to a mirror shine, reflecting the early light. His eyes were locked ahead, fixed on some distant point, yet missing nothing. Around him, the growing crowd of tourists buzzed with excitement. Children whispered, some pointing at the motionless figure, others hiding shyly behind their parents. Tourists snapped photo after photo, while a guide's voice rose above the chatter, explaining the significance of the guards and their role in British tradition. Some listened respectfully, others treated the soldiers as part of the attraction. Among the crowd was Ryan Parker, a young man in his mid-20s, decked in designer sunglasses and a shirt with social media king emblazoned across the chest. He was flanked by 3 friends, each with phones out, filming. Ryan, a TikToker with 500,000 followers, was known for his bold and often tasteless pranks. His plan for the morning was simple: mock the Royal Guard, capture it all on video, and go viral. Guys, check this out, Ryan said into his phone, positioning himself in front of Michael. We're about to make this guard famous. Behind him, his friends laughed and recorded. Before we begin, don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment below to let me know which country you're watching from. I'd love to hear where you're tuning in from. Bet you can't make him laugh, one challenged. Ryan grinned, then strutted closer to the barrier that separated him from Michael. Hey, my man, he called out mockingly, waving exaggeratedly. Your hat's bigger than my future. A few uneasy chuckles came from the crowd, but most turned quiet, sensing the growing disrespect. Michael didn't move. His eyes didn't flicker. The sun gleamed off his medals, silent testaments to years of service that Ryan completely ignored. Encouraged by the silence, Ryan pushed further. Don't be such a stick in the mud, he shouted. We're all here for fun, right? He turned to the crowd. Look at this guy. Probably thinks he's too important to even acknowledge us. One of his friends threw a crumpled napkin, which landed near Michael's polished boots. Still, the guard remained frozen, an unshakable figure amid the mounting provocation. Ladies and gentlemen, Ryan announced dramatically, I present to you London's most expensive statue. He resumed narrating for his followers, poking fun at the silent guard. A nearby mother gently pulled her child away, while an older couple shook their heads in disapproval. But Ryan didn't stop. He took his coffee back from a friend and sipped it loudly, continuing to taunt. Maybe he's asleep with his eyes open. Should we check? The tension in the square thickened. Phones began recording not out of amusement, but out of concern. People weren't capturing a prank, they were documenting disrespect. Yet Michael stood still, his expression unreadable, though a slight tightening of his jaw suggested awareness. Ryan, fueled by attention, stepped even closer. I came all the way from America for this. He whined into his live stream. The fans want more. A veteran in the crowd, wearing a cap adorned with old service medals, stepped forward. Young man, he said calmly, that uniform deserves your respect. Ryan spun around, eager for more drama. It's just fabric and buttons, old-timer, he jeered. I could buy it all on Amazon. Still, the guard held his post, unwavering. Ryan began a crude imitation march, mocking the guard's solemn stance. Look at me. I'm so important. I can't move because tradition. The crowd was no longer laughing. A Japanese tourist group lowered their cameras and bowed slightly toward the guard in silent apology before walking away. He must have trained for months just to stand still. Ryan sneered. What a skill. Then came the final act. Ryan raised his nearly empty iced coffee cup. Let's see if our statue friend here is thirsty, he said. The crowd collectively inhaled, sensing what was coming. The veteran stepped forward again, trying to intervene. But Ryan was already in motion. 3. He shouted. 2. 1. The cup left his hand in a high arc liquid and ice glinted in the sun as they flew toward Michael's face. In that instant, something extraordinary happened. In one lightning-fast motion, Michael's right arm shot up. With flawless precision, he caught the cup mid-air. Not a single drop touched his uniform. The crowd froze. Ryan's smug expression disappeared, replaced by wide-eyed shock. For the first time that morning, Michael's eyes locked directly onto his. A heavy silence blanketed the square. That, Michael said, his voice calm and commanding, will be quite enough. Every word was precise, steeped in centuries of discipline. Ryan stepped back instinctively. The crowd gasped in astonishment. Michael slowly lowered the cup to his side, never breaking eye contact. I was just. Ryan stammered, live stream forgotten. His friends were already disappearing into the crowd. The guard's next steps were deliberate, precise. In 250 years of guard duty at this palace, he began, we have faced revolution, war, and countless provocations. Yet here you stand, thinking a coffee cup would accomplish what armies could not. Ryan's face had gone pale. His phone hung limply at his side. This uniform, Michael continued, represents the sacrifices of generations. The men who wore it before me died defending what you mock. This isn't a costume. It is a symbol of duty, honor, and respect, concepts that clearly escape your understanding. A ripple of applause began but quickly quieted out of reverence. The security officer had arrived but did not interrupt. Michael turned the coffee cup, reading the name on it. Ryan Parker. And your social media handle. Very convenient for the authorities. Ryan swallowed hard. The veteran who had spoken earlier now stood smiling, proud. Michael added, the Metropolitan Police take a particularly dim view of assault on a Royal Guard. I believe this qualifies. The officer stepped forward. Sir, you'll need to come with me. Michael handed over the coffee cup. Evidence, the officer said, carefully bagging it. Phones were still recording from every angle. A woman in the crowd shouted, I've got it all in 4K. Michael resumed his ceremonial stance. The crowd parted as Ryan was led away, shamed and defeated. A father knelt beside his daughter. See how still he stands? That's what real dedication looks like. A young boy looked up at his mother. I want to be just like him when I grow up. She smiled through tears. Then you'll have to learn what real strength is. Quiet strength. Michael's actions became an internet sensation, but not for the reasons Ryan had hoped. The moment of the coffee catch was edited into dramatic slow-motion clips. Military veterans praised it on national broadcasts. What we witnessed, said a former commander on BBC News, was years of training crystallized into one moment. That catch wasn't just about stopping a cup. It was about preserving centuries of dignity. Ryan faced charges. His TikTok account was suspended. His reputation crumbled under the weight of ridicule and regret. Though he protested, it was just a prank. No one bought the excuse. Then you'll have quite an audience for this one too, the officer replied. Meanwhile, Michael was awarded a commendation at a private ceremony. When asked for comment, he simply said, I did my duty. As every guard before me has done, and every guard after me will do. The coffee cup was placed in a display case at the Royal Military Academy as a teaching exhibit, a reminder of how true strength is often silent, And so, on that golden morning at Buckingham Palace, a prank meant to chase fleeting fame became a lasting lesson. Dignity triumphed over mockery. Discipline eclipsed disrespect. And a royal guard reminded the world that sometimes, the stillest figures can deliver the loudest message. Emboldened by the growing attention from his live stream, Ryan decided it was time to take things further. He moved closer to the barrier, the coffee in his hand sloshing audibly as he raised his voice, continuing to mock the stoic guard. "I don't think our friend here is very hospitable," he said, turning dramatically to the camera. "I came all the way from America for this." He laughed, pretending to be wounded by the lack of response. The crowd had begun to shift uneasily. The laughter from his friends now carried a nervous edge, and nearby tourists exchanged glances of concern. A man in a veteran's cap stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "That uniform deserves your respect." "Young man." Ryan spun around, seizing on the interruption. "It's just fabric and buttons, old-timer. I could order the whole thing on Amazon." Though his words were bold, the mood had clearly shifted. The crowd, once merely curious, now watched with mounting disapproval. Parents pulled their children back. Others began filming not with excitement, but with quiet outrage. Still feeding off the performance, Ryan launched into a crude parody of the guard's rigid stance. He exaggerated every movement, mocking the discipline and tradition represented by the uniform. "Look at me!" he cried, marching foolishly. "I'm so important, I can't even blink because, tradition." The act fell flat. What had begun as an attention grab was quickly unraveling into something darker, an open display of disrespect that many could no longer stomach. The royal guard remained motionless, though a sharp observer might have noticed a subtle shift in his grip or the slight hardening of his jaw. Then, with his ego peaking and the cameras still rolling, Ryan raised his coffee cup and grinned. "Let's see if our statue friend is thirsty." The crowd seemed to hold its breath. Even Ryan's friends had begun to back away. Slowly, deliberately, Ryan counted down, 3, 2, 1. The plastic cup left his hand in an arc, spinning through the air. Brown liquid and ice glinted in the morning sunlight, hurtling toward the guard's face and immaculate uniform. What happened next stunned everyone. With a motion so fast it defied logic, Michael's hand shot up. In one flawless, fluid movement, he caught the cup mid-air, not a single drop spilled. His stance remained intact. His uniform untouched. It was as if time itself had paused for that single moment of absolute precision. The square went silent. For the first time that day, Michael turned his gaze and locked eyes with Ryan. The smug grin vanished from the prankster's face, replaced by wide-eyed disbelief. The crowd, still recording, was no longer watching a prank. They were witnessing the swift, disciplined force of real military training on full display. The air remained thick with silence, the echo of the caught coffee cup still hanging in the space between the royal guard and the stunned crowd. Michael stood motionless, the captured cup in his hand, but his eyes, now fixed on Ryan, spoke volumes. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and even, yet it carried through the square with the weight of centuries. "That will be quite enough," he said. There was no need to raise his voice. Each word was measured, deliberate, like the steps of a soldier on sacred ground. Ryan stepped back, his swagger crumbling in the face of the guard's quiet authority. All around them, the crowd stood frozen, their phones still recording, though many had lowered them instinctively, sensing something greater than a viral clip was unfolding. "In 250 years of guard duty at this palace," Michael began, his voice unwavering, "we have faced revolution, war, and countless provocations. Yet here you stand, thinking a coffee cup would accomplish what armies could not." Ryan's face paled further with every word. "This uniform," Michael continued, gesturing subtly to his chest, "is not a costume. It is a symbol. A legacy forged by men who stood their ground in the face of far more than mockery, men who bled for the duty you chose to ridicule. You mock tradition, but you do not understand it. You wear arrogance like its armor, but all it reveals is weakness. A hush fell over the crowd, some people visibly moved, others shaken by the unexpected power of the moment. One child stared up, wide-eyed, while a mother pulled him close, whispering softly. Michael paused. Then, almost casually, he turned the coffee cup in his hand and read aloud, "Ryan Parker. Along with your social media handle." He looked up. How convenient for the authorities. Ryan visibly swallowed. His bravado had completely vanished, replaced by the dawning realization that this was no longer a game. His friends were gone, blended into the crowd or too ashamed to be associated with what had just happened. As if on cue, a uniformed security officer approached, slow and steady. He didn't need to ask what had happened, he had seen enough. Michael handed him the coffee cup, and with calm efficiency, the officer opened a small evidence bag and slipped it inside. "The Metropolitan Police," Michael said smoothly, "do not take kindly to assault on a Royal Guard." The officer stepped forward and placed a firm hand on Ryan's shoulder. "Sir, you'll need to come with me." Ryan didn't resist. He couldn't. He was already defeated, not by force, but by something far more crushing, shame, delivered with dignity. As Ryan was quietly led away by the officer, the crowd slowly parted, giving space not out of curiosity but out of quiet reverence. What had started as a prank had transformed into something unforgettable. Michael remained at his post, his stance unchanged, his expression returned to calm composure. But something had shifted, no longer was he just a ceremonial figure in a red tunic. To everyone present, he had become the embodiment of discipline, grace, and unwavering strength. The veteran who had earlier called out to Ryan stepped forward once more. He removed his cap and, with solemn pride, placed it over his heart. 30 years in service, he said, voice thick with emotion, and I've never seen anything finer. One by one, other veterans in the crowd followed suit, removing their hats, saluting silently, honoring a fellow soldier who had stood his ground with more power in his restraint than any weapon could show. Among the onlookers, children who had once laughed nervously at Ryan's antics now stood tall, attempting to mirror Michael's posture. Their backs straightened. Arms stiff at their sides, eyes forward. "Straight back, darling," one father gently instructed his daughter, nodding toward the guard. "That's what dedication looks like." Phones continued to record, but no longer for amusement. They captured something else now, respect being born in real time, a moment where tradition wasn't just observed, but understood. Michael had not moved, not smiled, not boasted. Yet his silence had spoken louder than Ryan's entire performance. In his stillness, he had taught a lesson, one about real power, the kind that doesn't need to shout to be heard. As Ryan stood beside the security officer, his face pale and hands trembling, the weight of the moment finally began to settle on his shoulders. Cameras were still pointed in his direction, not with admiration or excitement, but with judgment. The crowd that had once been an audience to his prank was now a quiet tribunal, recording every second of his downfall. Desperate to regain control of the narrative, Ryan forced out a nervous laugh, holding up his phone limply as if to justify it all. "It was just a prank," he mumbled, his voice cracking under the pressure. "I do this all the time. My videos get millions of views. It's entertainment." The security officer didn't flinch. His tone was calm, professional, but firm. Attempted assault on a royal guard is not entertainment. It's a criminal offense. He gestured toward the surrounding crowd. "And from what I can see, you've just provided the prosecution with more than enough evidence." Another officer arrived, carrying a secure evidence bag. "We'll need the cup," he said. Michael, still composed, handed it over without ceremony. The cup was carefully sealed and labeled, a simple object now elevated to the status of legal exhibit. "We also have footage from approximately 200 separate phones," the officer added. "And that doesn't include your own live stream." From the crowd, a woman stepped forward holding her phone. "I've got it all in 4K, she offered. From the moment he started until the throw. Ryan's eyes darted anxiously from face to face, as if searching for someone, anyone, still on his side. But his friends were nowhere to be seen. The crowd that once fed his ego now stared back in silent disapproval. Some shook their heads. Others whispered. Many simply stood still, watching the consequences unfold. "You think this is content," the officer said, "but what you've done today will follow you long after the likes and shares fade. Your social media status does not place you above the law." Ryan opened his mouth to respond, but no words came. For the first time in his online career, he had nothing to say. His followers were still watching, but the performance was over, and the consequences were real. As the officers tightened their escort around Ryan, the crowd parted before them, not in fear, but with the quiet solemnity of people who had just witnessed something larger than themselves. The social media prankster, who had walked in full of swagger and mock bravado, now moved with none of his earlier energy. His head was slightly bowed, his phone dangling uselessly in one hand, still filming though the stream had shifted. The chat, once filled with laughing emojis and viral hype, had turned sharply against him. "You messed up. That guard just ended your career. Instant regret." The screen now bore the judgment of thousands, not cheers, but reckoning. He passed tourists who no longer bothered to hide their disappointment. Parents who had pulled their children close during the chaos now stood with them front and center, watching the final act of a very public consequence. The same children who had giggled earlier now looked serious, even contemplative, as their parents whispered lessons into their ears, lessons about respect. About boundaries, about what happens when you forget that not everything is a joke. Just as Ryan was being guided down the steps toward the police car, an older voice cut through the soft murmur of the crowd. "Young man." The tone wasn't harsh. It wasn't mocking or cruel. It was clear and heavy, like stone dropping into water. Ryan turned toward the sound, eyes blinking, as if surfacing from a daze. It was the veteran. The same man who had earlier stepped forward to caution him, now walked with deliberate steps to stand in his path. His uniform was gone, traded for a weathered cap and a pair of medals that caught the light with a soft, steady gleam. His face bore the lines of time, of service, and of loss, the quiet legacy of a man who had seen things Ryan couldn't imagine, and carried them every day. "I hope you learned something today," the veteran said, his voice calm but firm. "That uniform you mocked, men died wearing it." Ryan opened his mouth, but nothing came out. "That tradition you laughed at?" The man continued, stepping a little closer. "It survived revolutions. Bombings. Invasions. It's been tested more than you'll ever understand. And that man," he turned slightly to nod toward Michael, who had resumed his post with flawless composure, "he stood through all your noise. All your nonsense, and handled you with more dignity than you deserved. He didn't shout. He didn't raise his hand. But his words, soaked in truth, hit with the force of a hammer. The silence around them was absolute." Michael remained still, rifle by his side, his posture the very definition of discipline. But his presence, now magnified 100-fold, was felt in every corner of the square. As Ryan was led away, some in the crowd began to clap, not in triumph, but in respect. For the guard. For the veterans. For the principle that had stood firm in the face of ridicule. The applause was slow, soft, and short-lived, but it was real. Genuine. And it marked the shift from spectacle to reflection. Within hours, the incident would sweep across social media, not as Ryan had intended, but in a way no one could have predicted. The clip of Michael catching the coffee cup mid-air played in endless loops across every platform imaginable. It was edited into reels, slowed down, analyzed, set to orchestral music, and replayed by news anchors across the world. Commentators from both sides of the political spectrum agreed on one thing: this wasn't about a prank, it was about what it revealed. A former Royal Guard appeared on BBC that evening. His face was composed, his voice slow. "What we witnessed," he said, "wasn't just fast reflexes. That was discipline. That was years of training, years of pride, years of understanding what it means to serve. That young man didn't just mock a soldier. He mocked history. And that soldier reminded all of us, why tradition matters. The clip of Michael's quiet rebuke, beginning with the immortal words, "That will be quite enough," became a kind of cultural lightning bolt. Comment threads filled with messages like "This is how you handle disrespect, with grace." Others wrote, "Definition of power under control." Some even went so far as to say the moment restored their faith in human dignity. But perhaps most profoundly, it started conversations that rarely made it into viral media. Parents showed the video to their children, not for entertainment, but to teach something that schools often couldn't. Teachers used it in classrooms to discuss respect, duty, and self-restraint. Psychologists praised the guard's response as an example of emotional regulation under provocation. Meanwhile, Ryan Parker's world shifted violently beneath him. His social media accounts were flooded not with praise, but backlash. Sponsors dropped him. His followers plummeted. The title prankster quickly evolved into something darker, the guy who disrespected the Queen's Guard. Late-night hosts mocked him. Memes were made, but not the kind that gained fans. These were cautionary tales, punchlines, warnings. His apology video, released days later, was met with skepticism. "I didn't realize the guard would take it seriously," he said, his voice lacking the sincerity he hoped to convey. "I never meant to hurt anyone. I just thought it would be funny." But people had already seen the moment. They had seen what restraint looked like. They had seen the guard maintain complete control, not just over his body, but over the message he sent without lifting a finger in aggression. Michael Bennett, meanwhile, remained quiet through the media storm. When reporters contacted the palace for comment, a simple statement was issued: the guard was performing his duties as expected. "We are proud of his professionalism." That was all. No interviews. No fanfare, but something deeper took root. At a private ceremony weeks later, Michael was awarded a commendation for his conduct. Not for physical courage, though the reflexes displayed were exceptional, but for upholding the values the uniform represented. When asked by a senior officer how he managed to remain so composed, Michael replied simply, "I remembered that the uniform is bigger than me. I just had to trust in what it stands for." The coffee cup, now sealed in a glass case, was sent to the Royal Military Academy. It would be used as a training exhibit, not as a trophy, but as a teaching tool. Its label read, "Caught without hesitation." Provocation met with professionalism. Future guards would walk past it and learn a valuable lesson: real strength doesn't always respond with force. Sometimes, it only needs one hand and an unwavering stare. Back at Buckingham Palace, the atmosphere among the tourists began to subtly change. Where once the guards were treated like props, they were now seen with new eyes. Parents reminded their children to keep a respectful distance. Tour guides added an extra note in their speech, citing the coffee incident as a reminder of what not to do. Children stood straighter near the railings. Some tried to copy the guards' posture. A few even saluted. But the biggest change was quieter. People began to watch the guards not as unfeeling statues, but as humans, professionals, soldiers, symbols. And Michael Bennett, as he resumed his post each morning, remained as still as ever. Unmoved. Unshaken. But in the minds of many, more visible than ever, because that one moment, a single act of calm, controlled power, had echoed far beyond the square. It had rippled through screens and hearts, not with violence, but with quiet, unforgettable authority. And in doing so, it reminded a noisy world of something deeply important: dignity doesn't shout. It stands. The world moved on, as it always does, but some moments leave imprints that don't fade with the news cycle. In the weeks that followed, as social media dissected and replayed the incident from every possible angle, Michael Bennett remained exactly as he had been that morning: silent, disciplined, and unwavering. He offered no interviews, made no statements, and didn't engage with the attention that had swelled around him. That, too, was part of his strength. He let the moment speak for itself, but behind the palace walls, where duty and tradition are measured not in likes but in service and sacrifice, Michael's actions did not go unnoticed. At a private ceremony attended by members of the Royal Guard and military leadership, he was formally recognized for his conduct. He received a commendation, not for catching a cup, but for embodying the ideals etched into the very fabric of the uniform he wore. It was a quiet honor, presented without spectacle, exactly the way he preferred it. When asked later by a superior if he had anything to say about the viral fame, Michael simply replied, "I did my duty. That's what every guard before me has done. That's what every guard after me will do." No pride, no bravado, only a sense of belonging to something greater than himself. The coffee cup, the object of provocation, humiliation, and ultimately, poise, was cleaned, tagged, and placed behind glass at the Royal Military Academy at Sandhurst. It was not displayed as a trophy, but as a teaching artifact. The label beneath it read, "The cup that never touched the uniform, exhibit of controlled force and service under pressure." Young cadets now pass by it during training tours, some wide-eyed with curiosity, others standing just a bit taller, realizing that what happened that day wasn't just a viral clip. It was a lesson. A reminder that sometimes, the most powerful response is the one that says nothing, but still leaves the world silent, and so, the final chapter wasn't written in viral views or internet commentary, but in tradition. The story of one royal guard, standing still in the face of mockery, transformed into a permanent part of military history. A testament that silent professionalism will always outshine loud ignorance, and that true strength never needs to raise its voice. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to hit like and share it. Subscribe to our channel for more inspiring videos. Thanks again and see you in the next one.